The holism reductionism debate in psychology refers to whether it is better to study behaviour by breaking it down into small component parts, or to look at behaviour as being affected by many different factors. For example, is it better to look at genetic factors in schizophrenia, or to consider all the different factors that might cause schizophrenia? Supporters of holism argue that in order to understand human behaviour, we need to use several levels of explanation. We need to look at the environment and social context that a person is in, biological factors such as genes, and psychological factors such as motivations. Supporters of reductionism argue that you can only really understand behaviour if you simplify it down and look at one factor at a time. For example, the biological approach looks at how hormones, neurotransmitters and genes affect behaviour separately. This can be viewed as a more scientific approach, as you look at one variable at a time. Most of the approaches you have studied in psychology are reductionist. They tend to look at human behaviour from only one perspective. Cognitive psychology can be viewed as reductionist. Many memory theories reduce memory down to separate parts. For example, the multi-store model of memory reduces memory down to sensory memory, short-term memory and long-term memory, without taking into account the interactions between each memory store. More recently, brain scans have shown the interactions between different brain regions when processing information. The theories of classical conditioning and operant conditioning are reductionist because they reduce behaviour down to learned responses. For example, Pavlov's experiment with dogs showed that dogs will learn to salivate to the sound of a bell via classical conditioning. Social learning theory is less reductionist because it takes into account cognitive factors, thought processes, in behaviour as well as learned responses. Biological psychology reduces behaviour down to genes, brain structure and the nervous system. However, most psychologists believe that human behaviour is affected by the interaction of genes and environment. For example, genetic factors may influence aggression, but so does growing up with aggressive role models. As most theories only look at one aspect of behaviour, you can often make the easy evaluative point that they are reductionist. Just remember to justify why. For example, agency theory is reductionist because it says that we are obedient when we are in the agentic state, and it doesn't take into account individual differences in obedience. If you want to get more of my revision materials, you can buy my revision guides for both the edXL and AQA specifications on Amazon. I also have a website, psychologydon.com. If you want a bit of lighter reading, you might like my young adult paranormal romance, Infusion.